Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Home Buying Market Overview Workshop at the 2020 Virtual Housing Expo. My name is Jill Norcross, and I'm going to be the moderator for you today. I am with Virginia Housing as the Community Outreach Regional Manager, and I'm thrilled to welcome our presenter today, Nicholas Lagos, the 2020 President of the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. So before I turn it over to Nicholas, I'm going to do a little housekeeping. For today's presentation, we're going to let Nicholas run through his whole slide deck, which should last about 30 minutes, and then we're going to have a lot of time to open it up for question and answer. So if you have a question and you don't want to forget it, go ahead and put it in the question box. You need to click on the circle with a question mark in it and go ahead and answer your question, but we won't get to it until after he's done. Once you finish the presentation, please let other folks know that we're going to be broadcasting it again, a repeat at 4 p.m. on Facebook. We highly encourage you to visit the website, www.novahousingexpo.org. There you can find a virtual exhibit hall full of people who can help you. You get the opportunity for a free private financial and counseling session, and you'll get FAQs about all of our upcoming workshops and past workshops as well. So, and don't forget to check in with the Expo Facebook page. So without further ado, Nicholas, I'll turn it over to you and welcome.
Thank you so very much, Jill. I really appreciate the nice introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. As Jill mentioned, I am Nicholas Lagos, the 2020 President of the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. And I'm delighted to be here with you today to talk about our Northern Virginia housing market. So to provide you a little context for our local housing market, I'll be sharing some information about the national residential real estate market. I'll also be offering some tips for home buyers and sellers in today's market. So let's get this presentation started. Thank you. So the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors is a professional association of more than 12,000 realtors and the real estate providers professionals who work in the Northern Virginia region. NVAR, also known for Northern Virginia Association of Realtors, provides a variety of services to support our members, as well as the right to buy, own, and sell property in Northern Virginia. So this includes lobbying to support the ability of realtors to effectively serve their clients and also to support property rights at the local, state, and national levels. We do this in collaboration with our state and local counterparts. On the state side, it's the Virginia Association of Realtors, and on the national side, the National Association of Realtors. We also provide education and training to ensure that our members have the most up-to-date information available related to laws, regulations that impact housing market and their clients. And this basically ensures that they are acting with the utmost professionalism during the home buying and selling process. So our association, NVAR, is at the forefront of technology and digital innovation, which I'm happy that we're even doing this virtual presentation today. So we provide resources that enable realtors to stay ahead of the trends that impact the industry. This has really significance in today's market, and we're going to talk more about that a bit later in my presentation. And finally, we engage in industry and public relations, which is one of the reasons I'm here today. As a resource for home buyers, owners, sellers, we're proud to be a sponsor of the Northern Virginia Housing Expo each year. It really, truly is an honor for us to be here. Our goal is to help residents understand the local market, the home buying and selling process, and your rights and obligations related to real estate and home ownership. So I'm sure many of you are wondering, how is COVID-19 impacting our housing market? Well, so to understand what's happening, let's start out with the national housing market, and then we can move forward to understand that a little better. Take a look at home sales since the year 2000. You can see the steady increase until around 2008, when you may remember that the nation faced a serious housing crisis resulting risky lending practices. And I'm so happy that that's not part of this right now. The recovery began around 2010, and except for a few hiccups, existing home sales were steadily climbing, and they're going in, as they were climbing going into this new year as well. But although pre-pandemic home sales were strong, you can see that they were still below the peak levels reached in the head of the housing crisis in the early 2000s. One reason for this limited inventory of available housing is that the supply was very low pre-pandemic and it's even lower now. Some sellers are taking a wait and see approach and they're putting their homes on the market later. And some sellers who had already listed their homes took them off the market temporarily. We're also facing a shortage of new homes being built. As you can see from the chart, housing starts had already significantly declined leading up into the Great Recession. And while slowly climbing to approach the normal level last year, there now has been a drop. So in order to get an understanding of this, let's take a look at another volatile period in our nation's history to see if there are any parallels that might help us know what to expect during this current environment. So during the Great Depression in the 1930s, a quarter of the US population was unemployed. While we have not yet reached that level, unemployment will continue to be a factor during this pandemic for quite some time. I'm in my office, I had people waving to me from the window. I know I put the shades down for a reason earlier, so I apologize. The significant difference, however, is that the unemployment had been on a steady downward trend leading to the Great Depression, whereas employment during COVID-19 pandemic took an abrupt dive from the previous strong levels because we were at one of the lowest levels in history at that point. The big question on everyone's mind is just how long are these conditions will continue? So looking at the government spending, we see that in 1930s, there was much less of an attempt to reach a balanced budget. But today our federal government is expanding its spending, they're lowering the interest rates, they're enacting policies to assist individuals and businesses to lessen the financial impact of COVID-19. As you can see, the underlying conditions are much different now, not even close. Looking at the consumer price index since 2000, we see that apart from the stability surrounding the house crisis in 2000, 2008, 2009, consumer prices have been relatively steady. So according to Dr. Lawrence Yoon, who's the chief economist of the National Association of Realtors, we do not expect inflation to be a concern for the near future. What we do anticipate is a delayed inflation impact that could present in about 5 years' time. There's a possibility that consumer prices and home mortgage rates could rise, and this could result in a drop in the number of home sales and declining home ownership rates. We do expect home prices to continue to rise, given the inventory shortages that I spoke about a little bit earlier. But the upshot for people considering home purchasing right now is that locking in a mortgage at the current historically low rates would provide a buffer against rising costs of housing during the potential rise in inflation down the road. Real estate really holds its value. Right now, we're experiencing historically low mortgage interest rates. We have a joke that says that it's almost like free money. So looking at the projections for the 30-year fixed mortgage rate as reported by Freddie Mac, we can see that by next year, there could be a slight dip in the already low rates. Hard to believe. You can see that the number of home sales has dipped this year as a result of both existing low inventory and the pandemic. But that number is expected to rise again next year. Average home prices nationwide will continue to rise, but probably at a slower rate. Now, that does not all mean for us here in Northern Virginia. What does this all mean for us here in Northern Virginia? First, I'm going to share some encouraging signs for our regional real estate market. The data from our regional multiple listing service, also known as Bright MLS, shows that listings showing and selling activity has really begun to rebound now. On this chart, you can see the orange line, which represents new listings each week in 2020, has been climbing steadily since the beginning of April. And last week actually surpassed new listings compared to the same period last year in 2019. And looking at the orange line in this chart, you can see that the new purchase contracts are up compared to the same time frame in 2019. What is really encouraging about this chart is that it demonstrates that after the initial shock when the pandemic hit our region in March, a number of sellers who had previously listed their homes for sale decided to pull them off the market. And as you can see, the number of listings that have been taken off the market has now been decreasing and is now on par with the number of temporarily off listings that occurred last year. A lot of this is really because the governor allowed us as real estate to be an essential business. We continued to work, whereas some areas they had to shut down. Here we can see that the number of confirmed showing appointments has increased dramatically since the beginning of March, surpassing the number of showing appointments made at this time last year. Given that pending sales were down significantly in April, we expect the number of May closed sales to also go down. And this chart confirms that closed sales are indeed lagging compared to sales activity last year. But we think that the low sales numbers in May could be the bottoming out in terms of the market decline. So based on the activity in May, closed sales should tick up in June and continue going up in July. And we expect a spike in activity after the stay-at-home order is removed even further, because demand has been so strong even before the pandemic that it's only going to be going up based upon what we see. One thing that has not been impacted by COVID-19 is the price of housing in our region. The median home price sales through our region has continued to rise since 2011, and you can see that on this chart. Last May, in our NVAR footprint, which covers Fairfax County, the city of Alexandria, Arlington County, the city of Falls Church, the median price was up almost 3% over the previous year. And the number of sales was down by about 3% due to shrinking inventory. So this year, May sales were down about 30% below last May. There was a clear COVID effect, but the median sold price was up almost 5% above last May's median. And that speaks to the continuing demand for housing in our region. The lack of available homes for sale will continue to be a constraint in our region as it is nationwide. Some of the slowdown is inventory is related to demographics, and that's something unrelated to the pandemic. And that is not likely to change as conditions improve. We're seeing a trend of aging homeowners, of those in their 50s and 60s, I think I'm in there almost, that are staying in their homes much longer, and now they're downsizing or moving away to retire. I apologize, they're not downsizing and they're not moving away to retire, they're choosing to stay in this area. While we do expect improvements as the COVID crisis improves, the unemployment rate could continue to be a factor in our region's economic and housing market recovery. You can see that the trend for initially weekly unemployment claims in Virginia tracks the national pattern. And the number of new job posts each week nationwide in May is tracking fairly closely to where we were this time last year. The increase in new job posts is good news, but that could lead to a second wave of unemployment in the fall or winter if there's a second surge in COVID-related cases. We're seeing increases in cases in retail, restaurant, and for registered nurses. So that's going to be an important one to keep an eye on. In Virginia, you can see that the postings have begun to climb in May, but are still lagging in job growth compared to 2019. So focusing in now on our NVAR region, you can see that the number of job postings was similar to where we were last year, but it fell off slightly last week. Nearly 1 in 5 of the workers filing during the week of ending May 9 were in the accommodation and food service sector, which included hotel, restaurant, and bar workers. 15% of new claims for unemployment were from retail trade, 13% from health care and social assistance. What we do know is that the highest numbers of unemployed are in the state's most populated job centers, which includes Fairfax and Loudoun County. But we are also seeing greater decreases in new claims in recent weeks. In this slide, you will see that the rates of existing home ownership in various industry sectors in Virginia. You'll note that the home ownership rate is generally lower in those areas that have been most impacted by loss of employment. And we also know that many Virginia households do still have secure jobs with financial situations that have been unaffected by the pandemic or have actually even improved. We do expect that there will be a buyer's return to the market as the pandemic's condition ease, and we're already starting to see that. Looking at this chart, you can see that the increase in employment numbers by year end should trend higher in Northern Virginia than in other parts of the DMV region, which remains consistent with prior years. So the NVAR footprint in Northern Virginia is actually a very, very strong real estate market. For those of you who may be thinking about buying or selling a home in the near future, there are many things to consider. You may be wondering, is it safe? The National Association of Realtors recently reported on a Back to Business Barometer survey that indicated that while buyers and sellers are concerned about the health and safety measures, 65% say that despite the ongoing pandemic, they would attend an open house or take a home tour without hesitation. We also know that our members are handling things in two ways right now. We're accommodating, we're adapting for the pandemic. For in-person activity, precautions are being put in place, such as additional cleaning and sterilization of high-touch surfaces, requirement of masks, providing hand sanitizers or wipes or shoe coverings, and we limit the number of people. Not many of us can go away with this Purell, without the Purell. Realtors are also relying on many technology tools available to offer virtual showings, 3D tours, online transaction management, e-signing and notarizations, and remote closing. And I have experienced that personally. So make sure you ask your real estate professionals how to explain the options to you. So based on the data I've discussed here today, you can see that many people in Northern Virginia are indeed still viewing, buying, and selling homes. We know that owning a home is still part of the American dream. And NAR's 2019 survey of home buyers and sellers for Northern Virginia region, 78% of non-owners believe that home ownership is still a good financial decision. And 75% of non-owners believe that home ownership is still part of the American dream. And lastly, 81% of non-owners want to own a home in the future because they know it's a fantastic investment over time. NAR research has shown that home ownership has clear benefits for both individuals and communities with better school performance, lower juvenile delinquency rates, better health outcomes, and increase in civic engagement. Sustainable housing options are also a basic need that lead to positive outcomes. One thing that has kept some people from pursuing home ownership is the mistaken notion that you have to put 20% down to buy a home. There are many available options. That's not 20% all the time, particularly for first-time buyers, for veterans, and others. So talk to your realtor to explore the possibilities with you. They can refer you to a mortgage and finance professional that can find a loan product that best suits you. We know that home buying process can be really daunting. And while this slide shows 6 broad steps in the process, these can actually be broken down into more than 100 potential steps in the buying and selling process. I know when I worked with my buyers, I had a 121-step process. So visit our website at nvar.com/public to learn more about the process and the professionals who can guide you through it. And I mentioned professionals at the beginning of my presentation. That's real important. It's really important to understand that not every real estate sales agent is a realtor. People mistake that a lot. So to be a realtor means that you belong to the National Association of Realtors. And with that comes the commitment to follow a strict realtor code of ethics that guides their actions during every step of the home buying and selling process. And by adhering to this code, our members protect your rights as buyers and sellers during the real estate transaction process and by demonstrating specific elements of professionalism in ways that they conduct business. It also includes strict adherence to our national's fair housing laws. That is so important. So I encourage you all to visit nvar.com/public/your rights, where you can learn more about what it means to be a realtor. I'm really honored that you took the time to listen to today's presentation. I hope that you'll use the resources listed here to learn more about home ownership in Northern Virginia. And I really appreciate you tuning in to listen to me. And if you really want to reach me personally, don't hesitate. If you have a question, don't hesitate to contact me at president@nvar.com if I can be assistance in any way, but look at the guidance from your own realtor.
Great, thank you, Nicholas. Appreciate
Thank
the
you,
great
Jill. My pleasure.
overview. Yeah. So to our attendees, if you have any questions, we've had a couple come in so far, please go ahead and use the question box, type your question in, and then I'm going to read it to Nicholas and he'll answer it. So we are ready and open for your questions. First one, I know you talked about the kind of tight supply in the market currently if you are a home buyer. How can you make your offer stand out? What can you do to encourage a buyer to go with your particular offer?
That is a fantastic question. So I'm dealing with that with a client today, actually, and the best thing to do, number one, is be prepared. Make sure that you are pre-approved. Make sure that you have your documentation order. Make sure you know where you're looking and where you're buying. Make sure you have your finances in order. Obviously, credit is important if you're going to go to that stage. But be prepared, work closely with your realtor, follow their guidelines, and make sure that your contract is as clean as possible. By making a contract with lots and lots of contingencies, and if there's multiple presentation, the seller's going to pull the one that has the less contingencies. That doesn't mean you pull away your rights as a buyer. It just means that make sure you're prepared. So if things are important to you, certainly don't let that get in the way of buying a home, but at the same time, be prepared.
Can you talk a little bit more about those contingencies? What are you seeing that people maybe in this market, aren't including in an offer that maybe in the past, if it was more of a buyer's market, they could include?
One of the biggest contingencies we do not see much of as of late is the sale of a home contingency, for example. So typically in the past, you were able to say, I will buy your home if I can sell my home. Give me 30 to 45 days to do so. Now, a seller is not as keen on doing that if he has multiple offers. He's going to go to the offer that has as few contingencies as possible. Certainly, having a home inspection, having radon inspection perhaps may be important to you. But sometimes people get really caught up on little, inspections like, I want to have an inspection of the chimney and I want to have this and that. Those are important, but the more contingencies you put into it, the worse it's going to be. And sometimes you say, okay, I'm putting in a contingency to save myself $1,000 repair. And you have to say, is that $1,000 repair worth it to me to lose this house? So in a certain stance, you may have to gamble a little bit. Not to say you should do anything that's not making you comfortable, but sometimes you just have to pick your battles as to which contingencies are truly important.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
We had another question come in kind of on the topic from one of our attendees who came in late. And so they wanted to know, are they correct in thinking that a buyer's market is when housing prices are low, or is it when there are a lot of properties available? What does it mean if it's a buyer's market?
It's a combination of both. A buyer's market means that there is a lot of inventory. You can negotiate a little bit with the seller. For example, when our market tanked after 2004, 2005, it was very common for the sellers to be able to assist with closing cost assistance. Well, right now, the market is on the high swing, meaning low inventory, low interest rates, high demand. That buyer is not going to be in the driver's seat as much. So you're not as apt to get closing cost considerations or home warranties or things like that. So the buyer's market is a combination of high inventory and higher interest rates.
Great, thank you. Another question we have, can you talk a little bit, I know you touched on what it means to be a realtor and the code of ethics, but what should a first-time home buyer expect from their realtor, expect from their relationship? What should they look for when they're interviewing different realtors, and do you recommend that?
I do recommend it. First of all, a referral of a realtor can never be underestimated. If you're blindly looking for a realtor, you may not have as much credibility behind it because you haven't had experience with that. So it is important that I believe that they are a member of the National Association of Realtors and have their realtor logo, because they are held to higher standards. They have to take certain classes. They have to take fair housing training. They have to take continuing educations. They are part of the National Association of Realtors, and they take an oath to follow all the rules and regulations and ethical standards that is established for them. And you can go to nationalassociationrealtor.com and you can look at all the ethics rules that we are bound to as realtors. And when you do interview the realtor, a lot of it is a relationship building. How do you feel about them? How are you working with them? What kind of camaraderie do you have with one another in terms of synergy that you have? Not everyone's for you. Not everyone's going to pick me as a realtor. Not everyone's going to pick the next person's realtor. But it's really how you click. You want to make sure that the first thing you don't want to do is, I'm going to work with you. Let's go in the car and look at houses. Well, if you're going to go from point A to point B, you kind of want to have a map how you're getting there. So you want to sit and talk about it. You want to have a plan of action. You want to say, how are they going to help you? Are they available? Are they not available? What kind of consultation can they give you? They're not making the decision for you to buy that house, but they're there to assist you and giving you all the tools that you can make your own educated decision.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do you have any sense of how many houses you should look at to get a representative sample of? I know it probably depends on the buyer, but what do you typically advise? How many is too many, or how many is not enough when you're searching for a home?
Right now, there's really no rule of thumb because we don't have as many to choose from. So I've had as a few as 3, and I've had as many as 100. Yeah, that was a lot. When you have a lot to choose from, you're going to look at a lot of homes. But the key to it is do your homework in advance. Right now, you have the privilege of having everything online. Realtors have adapted. They put a lot of virtual tours, hundreds of pictures all over the web everywhere. A typical listing will have a minimum 30 to 40 listings on it, plus a virtual tour. You should be able to have a really, really good idea about that home. So that it's kind of like if you're comparison shopping for clothing or a car, you're going to start looking at them and you're going to start getting comparison shopping. Well, you should do that ahead of time online first. Start narrowing it down. So in the old days, when I say old days, I've been doing this over 30 years, you used to see a lot of homes. Now we're not seeing as many homes because the buyers have already seen the homes in advance online. Now all they want to do is touch them and feel it and be able to feel what the energy is like in a home before they buy it. So again, I'd love to answer the question directly, but there really is no rule of thumb.
Great. Do you think people are even looking at fewer homes because of the COVID-19 market? Are you seeing people?
Yes. Homes that are vacant are going to be a little bit easier to show. Homes that are occupied present a little bit more of a challenge, but we're working around that. I keep a supply of the PPEs in my car. I have footies. I have plenty of gloves. I have masks. Whatever feels comfortable. Now, the buyer, one thing that has changed is the buyers are not in the car with me anymore. We basically do a little caravan.
Interesting.
Yes, I've missed the one thing I've missed is the personal connection, because that time in the car was a lot of valuable time for us to discuss and talk about the house. So now we're going to the houses, and if it's occupied, we also have found that the listing agent also has supplies at that door because they want to keep their home seller safe as well. So even though we may be on the decline on the pandemic, we still have to be very vigilant to make sure that we responsibly show properties.
So are you typically going into the home with your buyers, or do you wait outside, or does it depend on the situation?
It depends on the buyer, but I always have to be in the home when the buyer is seeing the house. Okay. Right, because we cannot leave a buyer in the house unattended. So what we will do is we will follow social distancing. I will also ask that the buyers not touch anything. I wear gloves, so I will open any doors for them, any cabinets, any drawers, whatever they want to see with my gloves. I ask them again, do not touch things. So this is time we have to adjust for that. So at the end of the tour, I will make sure I disinfect whatever I might have touched with my hand, which is rare because I have the glove on. I still disinfect as a courtesy. I lock the door and I throw away my gloves. At that, there's no point of contact at all between the buyer and that property.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Switching gears a little bit, how does our region's economy measure up against others in the U.S.? Is it favorable for the housing market?
It's beyond favorable. We're still in the so-called little dream bubble in Northern Virginia. The Northern Virginia is such a very strong economy that when the market declined in 2004 and 2005, we did not see as sharp as a decline here as other parts of the country. When the market hit the pandemic, our numbers were staggering still in March and April. We expected May to decline because of low inventory, and people basically had stay-home orders from the governor, which we respected. But still, our numbers were very high. And if you saw the presentation I gave, the prices were even up. And the activity, even though the pandemic slowdown, is ahead of last year. So imagine if the pandemic had not hit. Because when the pandemic hit, we were at 4%, roughly 4% unemployment rate, which is almost unheard of. And our market was absolutely cooking along so well that it wasn't because of the market that we saw the slowdown, it was because of the pandemic. And let's also not forget one last thing. The pandemic's not forever. We may have to be dealing with it by next spring, or who knows how long, but at some point it will end. And, I think our region is positioned for that to withstand any major impacts. So we're very fortunate we're in a good region.
Yeah, that's true. That's good. Are you seeing buyers interested in different, because of COVID-19, in different amenities in a home, or maybe more like home office space or things like that? Have you seen their preferences change because of COVID-19?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I did a radio show that's going to air on WMAL on Sunday, and this was the topic. And it was very, very interesting. So home office had really kind of fallen out of favor in the last few years. Now they have surged back. I transported virtually all my equipment from my office here to my house. So at the time that I could work as though I'm at the office. The other thing that's been very interesting is people are now starting to use their homes. They're using their patios. They're using their fire pits. Pools that were normally out of favor, all of a sudden the hottest rage, because the pools being closed in the county, the children are flocking to their home pools. So their home now is entertainment. Kitchens all of a sudden are been incredibly hot because people are cooking at home now. They're cooking at home. They want to have a nice environment. So they're all of a sudden rediscovered their homes. I think people use their homes as an investment before. They use it as a place to sleep, entertain. Now it's people really, really got into their homes. So I'm really encouraged by that. So that's one of the positive things come out of the pandemic.
That's awesome. That's great. So here's a great question for you. We have an attendee who's attended all of the webinars, and she's wondering what is going to be the next step for her. If it's a good time to buy a home, she's particularly looking in Arlington or Lorton. So what would you recommend after getting the most out of the virtual housing expo? What should be her next step?
The next step is for you to select a realtor. You can take education to the cows come home. But at some point you say, I've done all my education. I think I know what I'm getting into. I now need the on the ground education from that realtor that you're going to select. And the other thing I would advise the attendee is perhaps pinpoint where you want to live. You're talking about Arlington and Lorton. They're two separate areas, two separate dynamics. You're not going to have the same dynamic in Lorton that you will in Arlington. You're not going to be in the same price range. So you need to focus in on your price range and comfort zone, your budget, establish a budget. Just because the interest rates are low doesn't mean you don't have a budget. Stick to your budget, stick to your plan, put all the education you did in perspectives now and say, here's what's important for me. Develop a wish and a must list. Present that to your realtor and let your realtor help you select the home.
That's great. Another question from attendee, what's the best time to buy a home? So this person had heard it's best to shop in the spring because maybe more people are selling at that time, but is there a particular time when it's best to buy?
Unfortunately not. Christmas of this year, I was writing contracts. in the morning. I have a rule that there's certain holidays I don't work, but unfortunately I had people in from out of town, from out of the country. And I said, I will give you a few hours in the morning. That's it. So the best time to buy typically is in the spring. We used to have the old adage that when the azaleas bloom, you can add $10,000 to all the prices because people feel happier and they're out and there's more inventory. It is true that a lot of sellers do like to put their homes on the market in the spring. Homes don't show as nice in the winter. However, with the low inventory, sellers were putting them on the market fall, winter, spring, it doesn't matter. And they were still selling. So buyers can see past the azaleas not being in bloom. You know, they'll plant their own azaleas for that matter. So, yeah, the other factor that's happened is now our cycle now has been pushed back. So we're now actually in a hibernate. We're coming out of a hibernation, and our spring market is now in the summer. So I have a feeling that our market is going to be going through the rest of the year right now because there's so much pent demand that when we get into phase 3, I think the buyers' needs will be even more important. And the other thing that's happening is that the renters that were not leaving and not moving are starting to come into the market. So that's adding more buyers in the market with still diminished inventory. It's going to be more competitive.
Yep, that's great. Another great question, kind of shifting gears, but how is all of this impacting the rental market that you're seeing, kind of the tighter, market for home buying? How does that affect rental markets?
That's an excellent question because I happen to own a fairly large property management company, so I can answer that directly. The rental market was actually very flat at the beginning of the year. It was incredibly flat because a lot of builders weren't building, but they were building apartments. So there was a lot of apartments available. When COVID hit, it actually flipped the rental market. So all of a sudden, the renters were no longer leaving where they were renting from. As I mentioned a little earlier, all of a sudden the properties that would come on the market were in demand because of low inventory being on there. And people realized that the rental prices were just as competitive as sales prices. But what's really important is if you have a very good landlord and a really good property and you're getting a good deal, then you're in a good position then. But the rental market is actually very active right now. In the last 3 weeks in particular, we've seen a tremendous amount of activity in the rental market, and we're seeing multiple applications. We had a property in the past that we had a hard time renting. We had 7 applications on it last week, which shocked me. I would have not believed it myself. So there is activity because keep in mind, it isn't just activity from here. We get 12 to 15,000 people a year that come into this area, not to mention what's going to be coming in through Amazon. So there's always people coming into this region because they know it's a good region. It's a very strong region. So we're not talking about just people that are turning over here. We're talking about people coming in from other parts of the country. And the last part is there's people from out north now. They're saying we're getting out of the big city because in the Northern Virginia area, we're a big city, but we're not. We're still suburbia within Northern Virginia.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I'm going to ask our attendees if they have any last questions to go ahead and make sure you put them in the question box now because we're kind of winding down, but want to give you time to ask some final questions. In the meantime, are you seeing in the rental market, Nicholas, a lot of single family homes being rented, townhomes, apartments? Do you see it all? Has that changed at all because of COVID-19 or?
No, it's still, the one thing that has changed is that a landlord that wants to show their property typically doesn't show it now till the tenant moves out. In the past, we would start showing it 30, 45, 60 days prior to the tenant leaving. Now to respect the safety of the tenant, most landlords are choosing to go ahead and wait until the tenant moves out. And so in that respect, but I would say it's more apartments, condos, townhomes that are rent more than single family. And so single family homes are very, very hard to go by right now.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think those are all of the questions that we've had. This has been really informative. I hope for all of our attendees too. I wish everyone the best of luck in buying their home and finding their home and finding a great realtor to work with. Obviously call Nicholas if you have any questions. He's obviously really familiar with the market and will do a good job. But we're thrilled that you joined us today. Again, please visit our website to make sure you're taking advantage of all of the resources. It's www.novahousingexpo.org. Encourage your friends to view this again on Facebook at 4 o'clock and join us for the rest of the workshops and sessions we have going throughout the month of June. So thank you, Nicholas. We're grateful for you joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jill. I really appreciate it, and to all everybody attending.
Okay, great.
Thank
Take
you.
care,
Have a nice
everyone.
weekend. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.